All right, so the next question comes from Mensch1066, and he asks, so didn't the Qing declare war on the Dutch, Belgians, and Spanish, even though they had no part in taking of the forts, so the Dagu forts? If so, was the taking of the forts really just a catalyst or also a pretext to do something, eliminate the legation district that the Qing had always wanted to do anyway?
So, if we're talking about the seizure of the Dagu forts as the catalyst for declaration of war, um, in short, it is. But in long, and we're going to get into the long, it's a lot more complicated than that. First, I want to mention though that the actual seizure of the Dagu forts that was only really conducted by three of the eight nation alliances, right? The British, Japanese, and Russian ships were the ones that were firing on the forts, and it was a joint British and Japanese ground forces that took the forts, at least initially, the first couple. Like the Americans were there, but they were operating under a very strict rules of engagement to only help civilians and not actually actively fight. So even though there are multiple nations, part of that force, the actual taking of the force, only done by two or three of them. The declaration of war against everybody has more to do, as this question suggests, with the overall issue of Western imperialism in China. So the Empress, the Dowager Empress, was waiting. She didn't know for sure if the forts had fallen, but even early enough as Admiral Seymour marching from the coast to get to Beijing, that was enough to get a lot of people in her court freaking out and get her panicking about what was about to happen. Now, some authors have suggested that the Dagu forts hold some special place in the Empress Dowager's heart because, as we just talked about during the Taiping Rebellion, the French and the British fought through, captured the Dagu forts, then to march on and set fire to the Peking and the Summer Palace, and she had to flee as a young concubine then from that attack. So there's a bit of a history there with foreign powers attacking Dagu, and strategically, it's one of the most important defenses they have. It protects the rivers heading to the capital. But there, the more you go into the discussion in the Chinese court about declaring war and about the foreign encroachment, yes, this is just the final straw, right? The word coming down that the forts had been taken, that there's more and more forces arriving, that was the final straw. So you've had some people argue that, well, she didn't really declare war because the ultimatum that the foreign powers issued to the Daegu forts to surrender was the first strike. But even before then, she was contemplating it and thinking that it might be the only way forward. And that leads into why war was declared against everybody, not just the three powers that attacked the forts or the eight powers that were arraying against the forts. Right? It was This was the last attempt that they thought they could do to wholesale push out foreign influence in China and regain complete control over their country because they were being exploited economically and imperially. Right? The European powers were through the century of warfare and treaties, taking land, taking rights to rail and business, taking over control of certain aspects of foreign trade. It's it's a humiliating experience, right? And the Boxers as a tool or as a thing that could be used to support their reclamation of their land made sense to a lot of people in the court. To some others who are a bit more proactive believers, this the Boxer Uprising represented China itself, the nation, the people having had enough. So there's some people in the court who are very clearly um, pragmatically looking at this thing. Okay, here's another tool in our arsenal. This means we should declare war. We can do this and win. There are others who are looking at it and saying, we can see now that the people of China cannot abide by this anymore, and we need to help them overcome. And then there's the Empress, who was thinking, I cannot be deposed. I do not want to be deposed, and I can't let this attack on Beijing happen again. because it will be the end of my dynasty, the end of my empire, and the end of me. So it's a very complicated internal struggle happening in the Qing government with a lot of factions. There's a peace faction that knows if they go to war, it's all going to collapse. There's a fanatical war faction who will ask for war no matter what, and who, even if left alone, probably would have tried their own way to get war to happen. And then there's the more, level-headed people who are still issuing or arguing for war. And in the end of it, you have someone who is terrified of losing everything she has. So it's a lot going on. Um, Also, to make things worse, of course, is that there were some rumors floating around that some of the foreign powers, as part of their ultimatum, were going to suggest that the Dowager Empress be removed and the Emperor be restored, regardless of how this turned out. Right? If there was any conclusion of the war, and if just in response to the assault of Seymour's column and the attacks, the murders of different members of the European community who were left on their own, like Baron von Cateller or Sugiyama, the Japanese diplomat. And of course, you can't have that. So it makes sense why she would want to declare war on everyone, right? The Spanish, the Belgians, and the Dutch all had um, legations in the district as well. The Spanish minister, who was very active in the diplomacy and politics in Beijing. So they're all part of this general European encroachment and attack on Chinese sovereignty. And they saw the assault on the Dagu forts, even if it's only by a few people, as the final straw in this overarching aggression by the European powers. And I think that's it.
Okay.
bit. Try to see if I got everything in my head there. I think bit rambly though.
Oh, yeah. Okay, so the next one's pretty quick. So, can you make a video about the Portuguese colonial war?
I'm glad you asked. No, that's something I've done a lot of reading on my own because I'm Portuguese Canadian and I'm very fascinated with the decolonization wars in Africa and East Asia, of course. So if there's interest, and let us know, I would love to sit down and talk about Portuguese colonial war in Africa.
Yeah, I have no problem hosting it. I would have to literally wiki it because I have no idea, but I can be the dumb guy that guides the discussion.
It's a very important war for Africa's military and social development after colonization.
Yeah.
And of course, Portugal, but I mean, that's a smaller scale issue, but it is important. So I'd love to talk about it if there's interest.
Okay. Thank you very much, Joe. It's been great as always, and I hope everyone enjoyed it as much as I did. And we'll see you next time.
Yeah. Thanks again for having me. It's always fun.